Hey, everybody. Welcome to week 15. Can you believe that we are nearing the end of the semester? We are getting ready to wrap things up here, but we got a little bit more to go. I hope you had a great Thanksgiving. I hope you had a great holiday. I hope you're able to get some rest in, do some things that were fun, that you're all staying healthy and strong. I hope that you were able to carve your work schedule for work and classes and anything else around so that you could get some downtime. So we're back at it. This is the week 15, as I mentioned, and we're going to study chapter 18 out of 19. So that means this is the penultimate week and the penultimate chapter that we will study. And if you don't know that word, it's a good word to add into the vocabulary. Penultimate means the next to the last. So there you go. No additional cost to you. So just think of the word ultimate with P-E-N in front of it and you're there. So as you think back about this whole class, and I'm not going to recap the whole thing as I've done a lot, but you can think about how that we started with a variety of styles and genres with blues and jazz and ragtime and folk and all these things. And then eventually we get to the 50s. We get to the rock and roll equivalent of the Big Bang with Elvis Presley. And then from rock and roll 56 on, 54, 56, it starts to expand outward again, and we've learned about a lot of that. We've learned about a lot of those genres going through the 60s and into the 70s, and that's going to continue on for a little bit here. So we're going to cover a couple of different genres in this section. So you got one module this week, one module next week, but of course next week you have your test 3 and all of that. So you want to really make sure, I know that I keep saying this, make sure that you're getting to these videos early. So let me just reiterate, things lock, right? And you need to get through the welcome video assignment to unlock other modules and to move sequentially through. This is important to get through the week materials, but it's also important with test 3 because there are a bunch of things. You have to get through every module, every quiz before your tests are unlocked. And you do not want to be reaching out to me at the end and saying, I don't understand why things won't open. Yes, it's the same. It's been the same all semester long. So it's important that you get to these things early, get them taken care of. Now, in the material for this week, you're going to learn about basically pop, and you're going to learn about new romantic, hair bands, and alternative rock. And something that's really important for this chapter and next, and we've talked about it a little bit in the last week or two, is MTV. So MTV was a huge game changer in terms of the world of popular music. And believe it or not, in the first handful of years, Music MTV actually played music. It wasn't until later that things started to shift, and if I remember in this video, I'll talk just a little bit about it. But so August 1st, 1981 is a super important date because that's when MTV went on the air, and you'll learn about that in the book, and you'll learn about that in the module. Now, not everybody in the country had access to MTV on that date, but it slowly came through, slowly developed across the country. And one thing to get, this is probably be like strange to all of you, but you don't necessarily remember these things. But so MTV came out as part of cable television, and now we have cable and fiber optic and satellite and all that stuff. But up until cable came along, everything just went through the airwaves, just like radio. And people had antennas on their roofs and rabbit ears on their antennas on their TVs, and they would pick it up. And so when I was a kid growing up in the 60s and the 70s, there was just a handful of channels. You had your national broadcasts stations, which were 2, 4, and 7, same as we have today. And then you have 4 local affiliate stations. So that would be 5, 9, 11, and 13. And then you would have PBS on Channel 28. You had other things that would go on. It was a very limited. And even, to really sound old, there was a time when if I wanted to change the channel, you'd actually get up and walk over to the TV and change the channel. And sometimes you'd just be like, I'll watch I'll just watch through the commercials. You didn't even really think about it. And so TV was very different. So in the late 70s, cable TV shows up, and it's a very different game. Cable TV costs money. It wasn't free like the other airwaves. Now the other airwaves were were free to us, to viewers. They were not free to the stations, and the way that they paid for it was by selling advertising. That's where commercials come from, and all of that, which makes it frustrating that we pay for things now and then still get commercials because they're always going to make money, right? And so as cable starts to come across, it changes the landscape of TV, and you start to get to 24-hour programming, because back in the days before all of this, TV ended at night. It would shut off at a certain time, and then programming would start again in the morning. Imagine that. And TV shows came out weekly, and you couldn't binge watch things. And so even if you think about today, you think about what we call the 24-hour news cycle. That came about because of cable news. Because now with cable, you had a 24-hour news cycle, and so they had to fill it. And that's why if you'll watch a lot of news channels, not like your local news program, say the 11 o'clock news or the 7 o'clock news or whatever, but if you go to, Fox or CNN, which CNN was actually the very first one, cable news network is what it stands for. Ted Turner put that onto the air. They have to fill that time. They have advertisers that pay for their programs, and their number one goal, believe it or not, is not to necessarily report the news to you. It is to sell the news to you and to keep you hooked. That's why, no matter what side of the political spectrum from the far left to the far right, and anywhere in between, their goal is to keep you coming back. So they're going to do whatever they need to do. Back when I was growing up, the news was a half an hour long, and it was like, hey, here's what happened today. It was unbiased. It was just, this is what happened today. And that was it. Now it's very different. So in this landscape is where MTV shows up. August 1st, 1981, it goes on the air, and it is 24-hour music videos. So that's important because, radio, of course, is 24 hours, but this is music videos. So this means that what you looked like played as much and in sometimes more of a role than what you sounded like. And just between us, it was not uncommon for some of these bands. It was a huge era of one-hit wonders, but it was not uncommon to have it where some of these bands that you saw and heard were not even necessarily the people that recorded. Now, we've seen that before in the 50s and the 60s, and you learned about the Funk Brothers and the Wrecking Crew and different things like that. But you would have studio musicians record, and then you would have a band that would have the look. Or maybe you would have a hair metal band that had the right look for everything, but maybe they weren't that musically accomplished. So this is a little insider secret between us. It was not uncommon to have studio musicians actually playing those parts. Some of those killer guitar solos that some of us know and love were not originally played by the members of the band. They had to learn them later, and they would have people to work with them so that they could learn them and play them live. So that is the truth, right? Now it's even worse, because now we can piece everything together on computers and create an entirely fabricated music part that can't be played. And then again, here's another little insider thing between just you and me. Some of these bands that you know and love that you go see in concert, some of them are playing to backing tracks. Some of them have backing vocals. Some of them are running through auto-tune. Some of them are completely faking most of everything that you're seeing. But you're paying a lot of money to see your favorite group, and so that's kind of how it goes. Even some super big, well-known bands. So just letting you know that. So MTV comes on the air, changes the game, and visuals become very, very important. And as a result of this, you have an explosion in pop music. And so the book's going to talk about Michael Jackson, Prince, and Madonna. Interestingly enough, the three of them were all born in the same year. They were all born in 1958. Michael Jackson, we already learned about the Jackson 5, certainly already had a career. His first solo album, Off the Wall, came out 79 before MTV hit. Prince already was a signed artist, established artist before MTV came along, but MTV was able to push their careers farther. And particularly with Michael Jackson. Michael Jackson is probably one of the two big artists, Michael Jackson and Peter Gabriel, that pushed the video as an art form. Even going from something so simple like Beat It or whatever to or Billie Jean to the mini movie that is Thriller was dramatic. So Peter Gabriel and Michael Jackson, super important in terms of pushing the music video as an art form. So you start to get extended length videos and then full length videos and feature length videos. So it changed the game, right? Madonna was interesting in there because Madonna was a product of MTV. Madonna was definitely an example of right place, right time. Didn't really have a great voice, still doesn't, but she had the right look. And she came in at a time when MTV was taking off and they worked to catapult each other to higher levels. And then Madonna really knew how to utilize, controversy, sexuality, all sorts of things to keep her in, keep her in the news, to keep her stuff out there. So, Lady Gaga really just played off of the Madonna playbook. Madonna just played off kind of the Bette Midler playbook and others before them. Again, nothing exists in a vacuum, right? So one of the things that we know, and I'm sure you've heard it many times, is that sex sells. So it is not uncommon. It's been going on as long as time, really, to use sexuality to do that. So Madonna very much played into that. So, you have those artists. Then you're going to learn about New Romanticism. This was a genre of music that showed up in England, also known as Blitz music, and it was very much about fashion. It was very much about synthesizers, electronic music, and so you're going to learn about some of the groups that came out of that scene. Particularly the chapter focuses on Culture Club, but also this scene you have Visage and Ultravox and Duran Duran. There was all sorts of folks that came out of this. And they were really picking off, in some ways, carrying on from the glam scene, but then modernizing it. And you had very, lots of makeup, lots of gender bending type of attire that came out of this. And so that was a big thing. It also picked up from some of the disco vibes that were going on. And then you have the hair bands, which are sort of the hard rock, heavy metal equivalent of that, which was that you would take these bands that were playing hard rock and metal, and yet then they would add this fashion component to that. And the book mentions Poison and talks a bit about Poison. Really, the band I think that kind of kicked it off was Motley Crue in the early days, and they really picked up from what Kiss was doing, and then they started adding more makeup. I guess Kiss and Alice Cooper in some ways, and then they started adding makeup and big hair. I don't know how much Aquanet was sold in the 80s. Many of my friends and my now wife and a lot of other people, I don't know how much time they'd spend getting that hair up there in the 80s. That would have been a great time to buy Aquanet stock. And so, the fashion became as important, and it lasted for a little while by the time you get to the mid 80s. And we don't really get into this class, but Nirvana came along and really kind of wiped the slate clean, especially with Nevermind in 91. And then you're also going to learn about alternative rock. And alternative rock is actually the path that leads to Nirvana. So alternative rock means, an alternative means other than usually it's the most popular thing or whatever. So alternative rock was not pop per se. Now we look back on it, things change. Alternative is always changing, by the way. And so you have bands that are kind of doing their own thing, making music in their own ways. And so in the late 70s and into the 80s, some of these that were able to capitalize with MTV, some avoided it, or it wasn't really something they engaged with a lot. But MTV was definitely a force to reckon with. So out of this alternative rock, this is where you'll get the Smiths, you'll get U2, REM, and then these bands will eventually lead to, you'll learn about post-punk, and then post-punk, you'll I think that's next week, and then you'll eventually that would lead to Nirvana. We don't really cover Nirvana because we don't need to. Most of you know about Nirvana. So that's it. Lot to learn about this week. I've tried to give the context for you. Hopefully you've been answering questions as we go, and sometimes I just put the questions here at the end, and so I may throw a question or two here. Yeah, that's it. Have a great week. Stay on top of everything. Just be as early as you can so that you're not having to sweat it through to the end. Have a great week. We'll talk soon.